Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky. All the football you love in one place. Across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.
Now you're very welcome back. Happy to say Miguel Delaney of the London Independent is on the line. Good evening. Thank you for the time.
Evening, Joe.
You were in Qatar. So this
Yes.
Was your first time experiencing World Cup hype and the World Cup draw. We'll come to all that in a moment. Just in a practical sense, because we've heard about the size of the place for quite some time now, and indeed FIFA's own technical report flagged the fact that this was of questionable size to host a 32-team tournament. What did your eyes tell you?
My eyes told me it was way too small. Even in relation to the draw, actually. I mean, again, all these sort of comments have to be put in the wider context of the much more serious issues, the human rights abuses, the institutional racism against workers from South Asia there, all that. But even from the kind of basic practicalities, on the night before the draw, it was basically impossible to book for people there to book restaurants in the Western Bay area, which is kind of the main hub of the city. And it felt kind of that there wasn't enough space for it. Added to that, I mean, there was so much construction work. And I think we've both been to the last few World Cups, Joe. And when you think about what they were, I mean, South Africa, Brazil and Russia, and of course there's other debates about those World Cups too, particularly Russia. But I mean, they were pretty much continents. And they almost need to be, because the World Cup has become such an unwieldy event, because it is so big, because it is, it is 32 nations. You need stadiums, you need infrastructure, you need training camps. Just compared to that, I mean, I saw one comparison was sent to me where if you transpose the area that the World Cup, or most of the World Cup can be played in, onto Ireland or onto Dublin, it's the area from Donabate to Bray. Apologies to the Twitter user who sent me that. I can't remember who it was, but I mean, that kind of sums it up. Now, the flip side is, just because this is an autocracy with limitless wealth, I actually do think they'll pull it off. But then you get into the questions of whether it's worth it at a moral cost, let alone a financial cost. Well, I actually, just to cut across myself, the one issue, I think they'll make it work in terms of facilities for the teams, all of that, and stadiums, and getting to stadiums. The one thing where I would have some doubt at the moment is accommodation, where it feels like that will be in really short supply. But again, we're talking about a country with limitless wealth. But then we are, even at the rate they can spend and what they can, I suppose, for want of a better phrase, almost the construction infrastructure that allows them to do things at a certain speed with this awful human rights toll. We're still now, 6 months away from the tournament, 7 months out from the tournament. And if you look, Tariq Panja put up a photo of the area around the Lusail Stadium where the final will be held. And it's loads of basically arid desert land, when all the kind of promo pics have like lovely greenery and great infrastructure around there. So they've still got to get that up, as well as construct a lot of accommodation. And my eyes told me it's just way too small. It was my immediate impression on landing there. But then, of course, you have all the rest of it.
Yeah. I suppose there is a grand tradition of any host city or country appearing in the media 6-7 months out, and will they be ready? The place is a construction site, be it Olympic Games or World Cup tournaments. Generally, they pull it together. It just seems to be the way of these things. And as you said, money is no object. Just in terms of size, though, with regard to accommodation, there has been talk of cruise ships and tented villages. Is that the direction it's going in, or will they just throw up a couple of skyscrapers? Oh,
no, the cruise ships are very real. Okay. Also, the cruise ships have the added element in that, because I was out there all of Saturday as well, and actually met some Irish people I know who live in Doha. So we're just talking about all these issues. And I actually had some of their friends who are Palestinians who live in Doha. I had some interesting discussions with them about some of the pieces I'd written. They weren't too happy with them. But we were just saying, one of the elements is that if you have the cruise ships, from what my understanding is, and from what the guys were saying who live there, you can actually, it's more easy to drink alcohol on some of these cruise ships, that the laws aren't as stringent on the water. Now, there is some talk that they will relax alcohol laws, because of course that is a big part of a World Cup, but let's not get churlish about it. But there is also some talk that they may relax off-license rules. Like at the moment, I think anyone looking to buy alcohol in Qatar is only allowed a certain quota each month or something along those lines. I'm not sure on the exact specifics of that, but that's the vague idea. But there's talk of relaxing it. But yeah, the cruise ships are another element of that, and that is a very real solution for it. But at the moment, so say if you want to go out for a drink after a game or whatever, you pretty much have to go to one of the 5-star hotels.
Ah, okay. Because I was going to ask about that. The general vibe around City when there's a big match on at World Cups or various events is the bars are packed, everyone's drinking in the bars, and generally the weather is good at these things, so people are on the streets as well, and it's fairly relaxed and people are having a good time. Is that going to happen in Qatar? Temporary bars built or otherwise? Because that's my sense. I mean, again, I think we'll get doomsday scenarios and this will be heavily policed, but I think in reality they'll throw up a gazillion temporary bars, and at a glance it won't look completely unlike previous World Cups. Or what are you hearing on that front?
Well, there is, so yeah, I mean, because actually we drove past the area where the fan zone is supposed to be, which is a long stretch of land near the Corniche, which is that kind of corner element of the Gulf where they have a lot of like a nice architecture there and all that. It's kind of an area being prettified as we speak now. A lot of construction there. And yeah, there has been some talk about putting up bars there. All that is quite unclear. But even as you were saying that, and when I was thinking about those fan zones, again, you can't help getting into kind of these bigger discussions about a tournament, because like I remember even again Russia, for all the many faults of that tournament, and obviously its legacy has changed and it's pretty much now a modern 1936 Olympics. But say one of my vivid memories of that tournament was being in Nizhny Novgorod, again a city people wouldn't usually go to, and just being in a shopping mall trying to get a bit of lunch before Argentina-Croatia, and it was amazing. The place was taken over by 30,000 Argentinian fans, like just all singing in unison. It was incredible, and I wonder, given that ultimately we're in a Muslim country with quite an autocracy and a relatively hardline conservative attitude, there are questions about whether this is going to be allowed or how they'll react to this. And even then, when you mention the fan zones, I mean, what World Cups have become, it's by accident, of course, and it's in an era where mass travel has been possible, and thankfully it's likely again after COVID. But what a World Cup really has become, and what is best about a World Cup, is a celebration of humanity. I mean, remember in 2014, Joe, when we were walking along like the Copacabana, and there's just fans there from everywhere. It is one of the, for all the flaws of World Cup, it is one of the quite beautiful things about it. But then if you're talking about Qatar, where there's obviously kind of religious laws about women, homosexuality is illegal, should a World Cup really be held, if it is this great celebration of humanity, which FIFA now try to market, should have been held in a country where large sectors of society may not feel comfortable going?
Well, it's very striking that Qatar's response to these questions is becoming less accommodating and more aggressive. For instance, Nasser Al-Khattaar, the chief executive of Qatar 2022, rebuked Gareth Southgate for mentioning LGBTQ issues. So it seems as if Qatar officially feel we have served our time here. We've taken a hell of a lot of criticism. This is now our moment. You can all just back off. And by the way, Southgate, if you think, and Norwegian FA chief executive as well, if you think you're about to start the rebuking of us for the next 6-7 months, we're not taking it anymore. We're coming out fighting. That was the read. And I can understand that from a PR point of view. They're going to make any manager think twice before coming out. The way he rebuked Southgate, I think he said, educate yourself. One of the great cliches when you're losing a fight, educate yourself. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, I think the only response to that is, well, you can't have a better education than talking to human rights groups on the ground here. And they would all say that the progress, which we're now basically duty bound to say that Qatar has made, but they'd all say that progress is nowhere near good enough. If anything, it's superficial. And yeah, you're right. There's been a clear shift in tone, especially as kind of Qatar's World Cup journey, again, to use a kind of one of these horrible modern phrases like educate yourself. We're 90% of the way through it. And for most of those 12 years, the attitude has been, oh yes, we're progressively and constructively willing to confront criticism. We want to improve. And I think it is certainly true that they're much more open in that regard, despite actually not being as liberal, say, as the United Arab Emirates in terms of what you can do in the country. They actually are more open in terms of criticism and being willing to confront criticism.
Okay.
But yeah, there has been a shift. There's been a definite shift in tone where it almost feels like the line is, how dare you not now praise us for making all these changes when, okay, yeah, fair enough. Some changes have been made, but almost every human rights group would say it's not good enough. There was a UN report last year which said that there's institutionalized racism against the South Asian workers. And you shouldn't get to host a World Cup just because you've made some changes as a consequence of that World Cup. Our threshold and our standards should be much higher than that.
On the improvement point, so the kafala system has been brought to an official end when it facilitated for however long the abhorrent treatment of human beings. So that has officially been brought to an end. In a practical sense, what are you hearing? I presume you didn't get to see very much of the lot of the migrant workers over there in your trip.
Well, no, to be honest, actually, we didn't, in the time I had, and, with everything going on, because it was actually quite an intense few days with the amount of events and all that between the different federations. And really, like, that's one thing a draw is. It's basically a who's who of people. A lot of people in football, like every federation head there. And it was our first chance, especially post-COVID, to talk to some of these people. So we didn't get to go to a labour camp, although I think virtually every journalist that is even doing the kind of the minimum requirement of the job will certainly have to come November. But you can't move for construction sites around Doha. It's remarkable, actually. This isn't a pedestrian-friendly city. So you're like, if you're trying to get from one hotel to the next, which is basically you're pretty much your social life or you're almost your professional life, if you're staying in the Western Bay, you could be walking along what seems a path for 2 minutes. And then suddenly it becomes a road, and then the road becomes a construction site. You feel like you're taking your life in your hands. So it's a very car-friendly city in that regard. But of course, yeah, you see construction everywhere. I was speaking to some of the workers on those constructions because they're so open. You literally, and in some cases, you actually do walk through the construction sites to get to your hotel. And so I had some of the guys even, opening a little passageway for me, and it's just like briefly talking to them. And I suppose this is another element of it. And there's an excellent piece from Nicholas McGee in Josimar about this, about just how deep the kafala, at least the culture around the kafala system goes. And one of the workers was basically saying to me, we like when Westerners come over, and and again, I don't mean to kind of say this from a kind of a Western perspective. That's actually one thing that was put to me on Saturday, saying like where it feels like every view from the Western media is hypocritical criticism of the Arabic world. That's not what I'm trying to do. But the reality was, I had workers saying to me that they like when Westerners come over because they tend to be a lot more polite than the local population. And this, again, it reflects something that we've seen from the UN report, where, and it's something that organically goes from these situations. And again, I would advise people to read Nicholas McGeehan's excellent piece in Josimar. Nick has he's been working for various human rights groups, now currently Fair Square, and has been big on human rights in Qatar. Where basically, part of where some of the local population and some expats, it must be said as well, this situation developed where they basically they talk so rudely and so down to so many of the workers. And again, that's quite a minor thing, but in real terms and how we deal with people in everyday life, it is actually a big thing. But it's reflective of an attitude, and an attitude that basically governs the kafala system. And it's precisely why, even though it's officially gone, the reality of it, and the way it's actually applied, isn't gone at all. And that's why, on the eve of the draw, despite Qatar's appeals to how many changes they've made, Human Rights Watch released an article about 10 questions that journalists should ask FIFA and Qatar about what's happening next. And among them, which sums up basically how nothing is really solved, just to read out a few, you've got, why does FIFA continue to praise Qatar's reform despite the ongoing human rights violations? Why are migrant workers in Qatar still not being paid despite announced labour reforms? Why has the Qatari government not published official statistics on the total number of migrant deaths? Do FIFA and Qatar authorities have any plans to compensate family members? And that's just in that last one. I haven't read all the 10 questions there. people can check it out just by Googling Human Rights Watch 10 questions. But on that, there is, so far, human rights groups aren't advocating boycotts of the tournament, and I don't think they will, in part because they know the mechanism behind these things is too big, and teams are going to go, TV is going to show the games, so you have to adapt to that reality. But one of the things, and this is relevant to your point about Southgate getting shut down, one of the things that players and managers can do that is actually quite a small thing for them, but could be a potentially huge thing for the legacy of this World Cup and where it can bring change, is ask for compensation for workers' families and ask for investigations into deaths. And that's quite a simple thing. And it's why the stock line from so many players and squads at the moment is basically, we need time to kind of assess what sort of gesture we're going to make. Well, this is one that has been promoted by human rights groups for months. And I think if you're going to go and play in this tournament, and I think everyone accepts they should, this is at least one small thing they can do. Otherwise, I think you're actually fair game for criticism. Yeah.
Just a thought on sports washing generally. Increasingly, I'm starting to wonder if it's worth it.
Well, sorry, that was exactly one of the points I was exactly going to make.
Okay.
Sorry, so yeah, you can go back. That's exactly it. So you can cut it from wherever point I started to lose the train of thought. But yeah, so when I was in Abu Dhabi talking to FIFA, or sorry, not talking to FIFA directly, but talking to people I know within FIFA. These aren't official lines. These are people trying to, I suppose, there's a lot of spin going on, especially given the current politics of football with the biennial World Cup and all that. And it was put to me to look at what's going to happen with 2030 and 2032, in which just after UEFA and CONMEBOL basically strike this new alliance, which is in response to the floated idea of a biennial World Cup. UK stands aside the FA stands aside for 2030, and even though Turkey and Russia have declared their interest, they're pretty much a shoe-in for 2028 with Ireland. 2030, it now looks like, because of this alliance, it's going to be Spain and Portugal to recognise the centenary, some marquee fixtures given to Uruguay, and then obviously Italy are going to go for 2032. So suddenly we have a real old world traditional powers, but very, Western democracies, which is such a shift from the last few years. So from one perspective, I think FIFA's, not their power has been neutered, but suddenly they can't railroad through the votes, especially with UEFA and CONMEBOL. Suddenly their sudden response to anything FIFA do is now, well, we've got the players and we've got the source of income then. So that's a hugely influential, a huge potential weight or influence on voters. But also, in relation to your point on sports washing, I completely agree. I think there is an argument this could well be the last of the sports washing era tournaments for two reasons. First of all, I think everyone is more attuned to this. I mean, this is ultimately bound up with 2018 for the way the tournament was won. And just because there's been so much discussion of it that everyone's more alert to it. I mean, Saudi Arabia is one thing with the way, I suppose, they're kind of railroading the way into sport. But say like China had been seen as the obvious next choice of 2030. That seems really unlikely now. And then the other side of that, it's not just the people who are tuned, but also I think that sports washing is now getting more sophisticated. And states like Qatar and Saudi Arabia, and indeed the UAE through Abu Dhabi, actually it's much more powerful to own football clubs. Because, I mean, while the Qatar World Cup has actually been, you would say, actually, I suppose, in terms of its perception, it's been quite debatable for Qatar. It's brought a lot of focus.
Whereas, it's been horrific. It's been horrific. I mean, this World Cup is Father Ted Creeley and Dougal Maguire outside a cinema. I mean, I guarantee you 90% of our audience, and I have to say me included, did not know the ins and outs of what the kafala system, for instance, was, and wouldn't have been completely au fait with various issues in the country. And to put it bluntly, I now have a much dimmer view of Qatar than I had before they ever came into contact with the World Cup. I hadn't given Qatar too much thought. Like, to the point, it's made me wonder if that's even, if like sports washing is what they're trying to do. Maybe it's just like a kind of a flex, like, look at us, we're great, and you don't like us, and we know this isn't going to convince you to like us, and we're just going to do it our way anyway. Because, like, if it's to make the 6 billion people in the world more well disposed to Qatar.
Yeah,
that has not happened. It backfired spectacularally.
Well, now I think in that regard, it's more about integrating themselves into Western society, and also given the politics of the Middle East. Actually, when I discuss these things, I often find it remarkable that I'm supposed to be a football reporter, but here we are talking about issues like this because of how the game is used. And it was put to me that actually football is a great map for where the real power and real money is in the world. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, whatever about the general person's view of Qatar, what's actually key here is that given how isolated they are in the Gulf, it's a lot harder basically for someone to declare war on Qatar when they've held the World Cup and they're so. I mean, look at the relationship with France, and that's another. Whatever about this World Cup, the PSG, and whatever about what you think of what a farce or a circus PSG are as a football team trying to win the Champions League. The PSG project has actually been a spectacular success. You only have to go out into the street and look at the amount of kids wearing PSG gear that usually have some form of Qatar branding on them. That's been a spectacular success, and it is that bit more sophisticated than maybe kind of the old world sports washing approach, which is basically hosting international tournaments.
Okay. Listen, thank you so much for coming on. Miguel Delaney of the London Independent was with us. Our football coverage and Off the Ball brought to you by Sky. Watch every UEFA Champions League, Europa League match live on BT Sport this season. Miguel, really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Yeah, no bother. All right, see you, Joe. But I'm off to the Etihad.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky, proud partner and supporter of the Republic of Ireland women's national football team.
This